Welcome to the Hong Kong International Cultural Summit panel discussions at M+. The event will begin in 10 minutes. Please be seated and be reminded to switch your mobile devices to silent mode. The discussions will be conducted in English with simultaneous interpretation into Cantonese and Mandarin. Please collect the headset devices at the foyer and return them after use. Thank you for your cooperation. Welcome to the Hong Kong International Cultural Summit panel discussions at M+. We'll start in 5 minutes. Please be seated. And once again, be reminded to switch your mobile devices to silent mode. The discussions will be conducted in English with simultaneous interpretation into Cantonese and Mandarin. Please collect the headset devices at the foyer and return them after use. Thank you for your cooperation.
Plus is an open platform to connect people from around the world to contemporary visual culture, with an interdisciplinary collection rooted in Asia. With our exhibitions and programs, we promote community well-being. That's what we bring, Museum Plus.
我们善用独特的策展角度和国际视野，透过具特色的展览，推广中国文化艺术的传承及中西文化交流对话，呈现多元化创新的教育活动。
好開心有呢個機會參與建立呢個西九舞台，可以同香港同埋世界各地嘅表演者、觀眾分享我哋嘅 passion、理念同創作，感受香港中西文化薈萃嘅魅力。
Distinguished guests, esteemed speakers, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the Hong Kong International Cultural Summit panel discussions at M+. This is Patricia Yang, and it's my pleasure to be your MC today. First of all, on behalf of the West Kowloon Cultural District Authority, we would like to extend our warmest welcome to all the speakers and guests, especially those coming from other parts of the world to join us here today. Welcome to Hong Kong and welcome to West Kowloon Cultural District. Today's event will also be broadcast at the Summit's webpage and app, as well as on West Kowloon Cultural District Facebook and YouTube. We'd also like to welcome guests who are viewing the live stream right now at the M+ Cinema and online. Let's hear a warm applause to welcome everyone joining us this afternoon, shall we? Thank you. The two panel discussions today will be conducted in English with simultaneous interpretation into Cantonese and Mandarin. Please be reminded to switch your mobile devices to silent mode, switch off any sound and light emitting devices. Flash photography, video, or audio recording are prohibited. Thank you for your cooperation. The Hong Kong International Cultural Summit is a highlight event of the Hong Kong Art Week and the largest international cultural conference ever staged in Hong Kong. With the theme of connecting cultures, bridging times, the summit is set to be an extraordinary confluence of global cultural intellect and vision. The authority has invited eminent speakers from around the world to exchange views on topical issues related to the future development of cultural districts and museums. Before we start the panel discussions, please join me in welcoming on stage Mr. Bernard Chan, Chairman of the M+ Board, on stage for a few words. Please welcome Mr. Chan.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to the West Kowloon Cultural District, and welcome back to M+ Museum, and also to the inaugural Hong Kong International Cultural Summit 2024. It is my great pleasure to welcome over 1,000 creative luminaries to the summit for 3 days of engaging collaboration. It is a momentous occasion for Hong Kong and for the global arts and cultural industry. Since M+ opening in November 2021, the museum has moved beyond a conventional institution. It is committed to defining a distinctive new voice for the visual culture throughout Asia and reaching new audience through ongoing collaborations, dialogue, and debate. I am very pleased to share that M+ has signed 10 Memoranda of Understanding, MOU, with leading museums, conservation institutes, and film archives on the very first day of our summit yesterday. This is a very wonderful testament to the efforts of the M+ team and the West Kowloon Cultural District. Such meaningful cross-cultural collaboration demonstrate our vision to nurture a global cultural network and signify a significant vote of confidence in M+ as Asia's first global museum of contemporary visual culture and Hong Kong at its birthplace. The proportion of visitors to M+ increased from less than just 5% in January 2023 last year to 65% by the end of last year. We are very proud that West Kowloon Cultural District has become one of Asia's most popular cultural landmarks and the 6th most visited destination in Hong Kong last year. In our just only 2.5-year history, we have now over 5 million visitors. As M+ is a museum for the 21st century, digital technologies are crucial as tools for artists and museum professionals in research, the knowledge sharing, exhibitions, and display and outreach. So this afternoon, the 2-panel discussion will take place here. We have gathered speakers from major institutions, including the curators, the digital artists, the cultural consultants, the architects, and the technology entrepreneurs to discuss the impact of digitization and technologies on artists and artistic practices and creative expression, and the broader influence on our communities. I'm very pleased and honored to express my heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed panel speakers and the moderators for coming from different parts of the world to contribute to a compelling dialogue this afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. I know many of you come to Hong Kong Pacific for this, but beyond the summit, I'd like to invite everyone to explore the district, our museums, and the West Kowloon Cultural District, and to experience the vibrancy that Hong Kong has to offer. I hope you will enjoy this afternoon's discussions, and I wish you all a very fruitful and enjoyable experience in the Hong Kong Art Week. Those of you who attended this morning's session, I know our chairman of the district, Mr. Henry Tang, reminded everyone, please spend money in Hong Kong. I won't do that, but because I'm sure once you get a chance to walk around and experience what Hong Kong can offer, I'm sure you're going to spend the money, so I don't have to specifically say it to remind you. But once again, thank you for joining this afternoon's session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chan, for the welcoming speech. I'm sure we're very excited about the upcoming panel discussions as well as the programs following up in the next few days in the summit. Well, our first panel today, Promise of Digital, explores the profound impact of emerging technologies on the global ecology of arts and culture and features leaders of arts and cultural institutions from around the world. Before I introduce our panel members, we would like to let you know that if time allows, there will be a Q&A session by the end of the panel discussion. So please feel free to send your questions by using the HKICS app. There will be a Q&A function where you can submit your questions. Now we're delighted to introduce today's panel on Promise of Digital. First of all, our panel moderator, Dr. Andres Zanto. As cultural strategy consultant and author based in New York, United States, Dr. Zanto advises museums, foundations, educational institutions, and corporations on cultural strategy and program development worldwide. His recent books are The Future of the Museum in 2020 and Imagining the Future Museum in 2022. Please welcome Dr. Zanto. And now our four speakers. First, we have Mr. Rafik Anadol, media artist and director, Rafik Anadol Studio, United States and Turkey. Mr. Anadol is an internationally renowned media artist, director, and pioneer in the aesthetics of data and machine intelligence. Please welcome Mr. Anadol. Joining us on the panel, we also have Dr. Marcella Lista. She is an art historian and head curator of new media at Musée National d'Art Moderne Saint-Pompidou. Her mission also covers researching and collecting in the Asia-Pacific region. Please welcome Dr. Lista. Next, we have Dr. Thomas P. Campbell, Director and CEO, Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, United States. Dr. Campbell served for over a decade as Director and CEO of two major U.S. art museums, the Metropolitan Museum of Art from 2009 to 2017, and the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco since 2018. Please welcome Dr. Campbell. Finally, we're pleased to have Ms. Mahalo Uchida, Project Head, Center for Cultural Innovations at Takanawa Gateway City, East Japan Railway Foundation for Cultural Innovations Japan. Ms. Uchida specializes in the combined field of art, technology, and design. Previously, she served as senior curator at the Miraikan National Museum of Emerging Science and Innovation in Tokyo, Japan. Please welcome Ms. Uchida. Now I'll pass the mic over to our moderator, Dr. Zanto.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. This is extraordinary. It's incredible to be here in Hong Kong, for me, 4 years being away, and to be at this first great international summit. This morning, we listened and heard about 4 extraordinary physical, infrastructural initiatives all around the world. Today, and this afternoon, we're sort of going to jump into the other side of this, 2 back-to-back panels on digital. But before we go into digital, I just for a moment would like to honor and celebrate the physical, the analog, because I think for all of us here today who work with museums, that is very much at the heart of our enterprise, these unique objects, these extraordinary creations, to walk through M+, to see these objects, including from Uli Sik's collection, is truly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So we should continue to honor all of those wonderful physical objects. But that said, we're now going to talk about digital. So how are digital technologies changing artistic practices? How are they changing museums? We'll explore this in a number of ways, but we're going to sort of come at it from 2 directions. So on the one hand, digital art opens up just a whole wealth of creative possibilities. Looking at you, Rafik, we are really in the middle of a kind of revolution of art making, and we want to explore what that means and what that means for museums as we have to adapt them to have sort of skills and capacities to engage this kind of new content. On the other hand, we have digital tools that can help us with museum making, They can help us to organize the museum. They can help us to connect the museum to audiences. They can help us to create new kinds of facilities, experiences for the public. So it's a tool of museum making as well. So we'll talk about that as well. But let me quickly set out a little bit of context. I mean, number one, I'd like to say this is all so new. I mean, for most of us, it's really all very new. From a historical standpoint, it's a flash. It took museums about a half century to absorb photography from the time it was invented to really bring it into the museum. It took video 20, 30 years to be taken seriously as a museological concern. Think about this alphabet soup: AR, VR, Web3, NFTs, DAIO, DAO, fractional tokenization, artificial intelligence. These are the metaverse. These are terms that many of us had never even heard of 2 or 3 years ago. I dare say there might be some in the audience who still haven't heard of these terms. So, this is all new to us. It's going to take us a while to absorb it into the museum enterprise. So those of you who are coming from the technology world, don't be too hard on us for not having fully absorbed this into our enterprise. So second, while artists are often among the first to embrace new technologies, the museums, it's a little bit of a different story. We are risk averse. There's a certain amount of well-placed conservatism that's inscribed into the museum. I like to say that we venerate innovation in our galleries, but as organizations, we are not particularly innovative. We are a little bit afraid of risk. That said, and this is the third point, I think we all realize that in order to tap into the promise of digital, we are going to have to change museums. Museums are already changing to tap into the promise of digital. That's going to require new behaviors. And the question, I think, that these two panels this afternoon sort of circumnavigate in one way or another is how do we do that, and how much change do we want? How much change do we tolerate? What's okay, what's not okay? Ours is a sector guided by norms. And conversations like this, I'd like to believe, are a way of feeling our way towards new norms, new agreements, new understandings, new rules of the game around how we're going to do this. So there could be no better group to explore these questions than the amazing group of colleagues gathered here. We have a pioneering digital artist in Rafik Anadol. We have a curator of a famously risk-taking institution, the Centre Pompidou, over there with Marcela Lista. We have a director of an established museum in San Francisco, which is working to recalibrate itself, to adapt to digital, in Tom Campbell. And of course, we have a very lucky colleague who's inventing an entirely new art institution in Manolo Uchida. So once again, please give them a round of applause before they share their ideas. So the way this is going to work is we will have a series of very brief, my panelists have agreed this will be very brief, overviews of some of what they're working on. I'm curious really what this promise of digital means to each of you given where you sit. And as you can see, they all are coming at this from different vantage points. Then we're going to talk a little bit amongst ourselves. If there's time, we'll do a few questions, and that's going to be it. So we're going to start with Rafik. You need no particular introduction to this audience. I think, who's seen a Rafik Anadol work? A sea of hands go up. You're one of the best-known artists working today, working with digital tools. We ourselves have worked together a fair amount. Your studio recently developed a new artificial intelligence model, which we will see in a minute. You have been working on a new, already announced Museum of AI Art in Los Angeles, which has been our great fun project. So tell us about the promise of digital as a tool of telling stories and meaning.
Absolutely. So first of all, deeply grateful to be here in Hong Kong, in all together. And but before I start, may I kindly ask for everyone just one simple request? can everyone please hold their hands next to you for just 10 seconds? If the culture is not allowing you, maybe your heart, just a social moment. Just for 10 seconds, maybe less.
Right.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're done. We can go now.
Yeah, so I'm so grateful to do this together for a reason I will explain you. Is it my microphone? Sorry. Let me just take this out here. Glitch. I'm so grateful to be here today because I want to show something that I hope will make a positive impact for humanity, not only just arts and culture. I'm, by the way, originally from Istanbul, where also West and East connects, and I know Hong Kong is very special, and I'm so grateful to be here, coming from the same mindset of like connecting cultures and the worlds. I was 8 years old when I got my first computer. It's so funny that one day AI becomes a co-creator, a machine becomes a co-creator. It's a very like an early age imagination. But also the science fiction, like in here, and I know the Hong Kong is one of those incredible media facades in the world. I knew that one day art will go beyond the 2D, three-dimensional world, and I knew that architecture can become a canvas. And right now, we are a team of 20 people, can speak 15 languages, and 10 countries in our studio in Los Angeles, California. And we are trying to make art for anyone, any age, everyone, and any culture. And we do it through public art, through museum and galleries. We have artworks in a hospital, in a school, in airports, in places maybe art may not be taught before. So we try to explore this idea also of the machine hallucinations, which I know that has been some sort of, now the keyword hallucination in AI space feels weird, but for artists like myself, programming machines to imagine or create work, this is a keyword that makes more inspiration. And by the way, this idea started 8 years ago, 2016. It was the time I was at Google as an artist in residence, and I learned how to use neural networks and try to create the idea of if a machine can learn, can it dream? And that was like a very early start of the idea of this data pigmentation. I hope that one day, if machine can dream or hallucinate, I thought that that is not a normal pigment or a sculpture we know. Maybe it doesn't have any boundaries. Maybe it doesn't have a Newtonian physics regulations or restrictions. It can be completely like life, like in flux. And over the years, our project has transformed multiple surfaces of pioneer buildings and cultural endeavors. This is Gaudi's Casa Batlló. We received 65,000 people in Barcelona and transformed the legacy of Gaudi into a performative arts with AI and data. And what you see is real-time transforming and never the same, and each performance is unique and transcoding itself in the cloud computation and honoring the 1 billion data points of Gaudi's life. So we try to use AI, not necessarily erase humanity, but instead try to bring and uplift our pioneers and heroes in the culture, in the nature, in the space and beyond. And our work also has been explored this idea of embedding media arts into architecture, seeing beyond the facade, seeing beyond the like concrete, glass, and steel, how we can turn information around us, the invisible patterns of life, into different paintings, sculptures, and performances. This is a piece in Las Vegas using a 500 feet long, a very extraordinary eco-rectangular projection of data pigmentations. And I found that this is fascinating that once we go beyond the boundaries of like canvas or the physical reality, there is a whole possibilities. But possibilities comes with responsibilities. As a studio, last 30 years, we also work with Web3 space. So we have wonderful collectors here in Hong Kong in the Web3 space, from Animaka to Jian Chu and many others. We are very grateful that the field we are creating is not just in the classical gallery world, but I think the Web3, the blockchain, allowed artists like myself to be more in the independent space and create exciting projects. For example, during the pandemic, 2021, get this exciting invitation from MoMA, and specifically curators Michel Coe and Paolo Antonelli and Kees Rias. It was a fascinating time in the hopeless time of pandemic, when the world was closed, the museums were closed. This project truly brightened up our imagination. And we were able to work with 138,000 archives of MoMA. By the way, this data is publicly available last 7 years online, and we didn't do too much about digitization. It was already digitized. But the idea was, what will be this idea of a machine that dreams new vocabularies, new worlds of imagination, without mimicking the original artist? Can we find the new vocabulary? Can we find the new tone? Can we control, and chance becomes the algorithm? So what you see took us 6 months to create an algorithm to let the AI literally demystify the machine decisions and transform this ever-changing artwork by using a microphone, a camera, and a weather station. I thought that it's kind of this living artwork that ever changes over time, like life. And what was transformative to me was, it's not just putting a screen on like a museum. It was a collaboration with art historians, collaboration with curators, painters, carpenters, IT. It's a truly collaborative approach than just a surface level augmentation. And I think that's one of the reasons the work received almost close to 3 million people in the museum, and our average viewing was 38 minutes. I believe this is one of the longest time, which I'm happy to explain more. And after this, of course, possibilities comes with responsibilities. As a studio, we decided to bring our last 10 years of experience into a new institution that we call it Dataland. I know the name has lots of context and discourse, but our hope is really think about the medium that I have been trying to create as an artist, but also artists around working with data and algorithms and imagining like this, pioneering this field and try to bring them together. And to do that, we decided not to just create another institution, but we decided to do it with something that I hope everyone cares, creating an AI model dedicated to nature. Current AI research only focuses on human reasoning and human intelligence, but nature is the most intelligent thing we have. Nature is the most unique, most complex thing we have. So we dedicate our research to nature. To make it happen, we are partnering with wonderful institutions and museums, Smithsonian, Natural History Museum, London, BBC, National Geographic, and we receive more than 500 million images. So what I'll be showing you is completely done in our studio, literally in the studio, and transform this data into almost realistic images. What this AI model does is not only create art, but has a scientific context. Imagine that a trustable AI that can imagine flora, fauna, and fungi of universe, a rainforest. And these are images that we quickly explore. And what is also exciting is this AI can also create text-to-video outputs. It's a fascinating time in AI that is constantly changing. Large language models are taking over all our everyday systems and imaginations. But I do believe that if we create an AI model from scratch, open source, and showing where data comes from, and demystify every single steps of it, it will create a positive impact for society. And I do believe that it is also possible to do it in a different way than just technology partners are creating this incredible work. To do that, we also transform our imagination by going to Amazonia and living in the data. Because AI cannot be just learn cold information. We decided to do this project in collaboration with Amazonian friends and families called Yavanava family. They are living in Amazonia in Brazil, Acre, with harmony for thousands of years. We thought that we have to first understand them. What does it mean to be living in the nature in harmony, and then inspire and apply the logic and mindset, and not only open our minds, but also our hearts. The reason I kindly ask you to also hold your hands was a kind request from the chief Nishiwaka, who has been mentoring our research. And by the way, what you see here is not just a video, it is a text-to-image, text-to-video, text-to-sound, and also text-to-scent, meaning this AI has a perfume, and I'm happy to give you a sample. So we are entering in this new world I call generative reality. And I would like to finish this presentation with the words of Amazonian families, who I think we believe will bring more wisdom to our life. And he says, it's new times we are living now. Time for forgiveness, time for love, time for spirituality. It's time for humanity to look back to the origins, to the earth, to our hearts, to learn, to love, and respect one another, to make alliances, join forces. This is the moment. Thank you very much for listening.
Great. Well, thanks for giving us this quick guided tour of your journey, which again is so recent in a way, by historical standards. The one thing that combines all of these works, two-dimensional projection, all the way to the AI work, is data. And we know that we live in this moment of great anxiety about sharing of data, but you just listed off some of the world's greatest research institutes. What is the promise you can make to these entities? Because your work needs data the way an impressionist painter needs the outside world and a can of tube of paint. How do you get them to interact with you?
So I think so first of all, it's about creating a thinking brush. And that brush needs context of life. In this case, nature is the input. And these institutions are doing remarkable work for decades by preserving nature, by holding that to like open sourcing it. So I thought that we need a new narrative and vocabulary to be sure that data is relevant and visible. And that maybe will create a new campfire around AI than just hysteria and paranoia. And actually opening the gates of data by showing it where it comes from, it creates a safe and secure space. And actually our show at Serpentine Galleries right now in London is exactly perfectly experimenting this idea.
Well, let's hold that thought because I'm sure we'll come back to the issues of data, data sharing, data security. But I want to move on to Marcella, who is, of course, affiliated with a museum that from its very beginnings questioned museum structures, embraced new forms of expression, and the work you do now at the Pompidou as a curator focused on digital art forms is an extension of that legacy. Tell us a little bit about how a great institution like that is dealing with this fresh wave of innovation, and what kind of standards and thinking are you bringing to the question of what kind of digital art should come into a collection and how to present this in a museum?
Well, thank you, Andras, and thank you also to West Kowloon Cultural District and M+ for the invitation. Thanks for your question. As a museum that covers from early 20th century art up to contemporary, of course, our vision starts with art history. So there's no such thing as just starting with the digital, but rather examining the history of media. I would like here maybe to share with you 4 topics that could bring to discussion about what is the role of museums in preserving and displaying this type of art. Starting with Chris Marker's Zapping Zone. This is an artwork that was conceived by Chris Marker, most famously a filmmaker, coining the term film essay in '62. He's less known for being a pioneer of new media. He created this work in 1999, which took us 2 years to study and restore to be able to put it back into function. You can see here the early experiments of Chris Marker, who was advocating for a form of naive computer graphic and use of computer, just as Douanier Rousseau was using naive painting in the early 20th century. So our role was really to go through complex process of restoration, including like a new form of iconography, documentation of Apple IIgs computers, looking at how pixels were in the 80s were round, not square. So that's a fascinating journey into how all the early new media work is difficult because of obsolescent, phenomena around the hardware and software, and how we should look at new media maybe as something that is challenging to preserve. And I would advocate for the term, instead of new media, to speak about unstable media, a media that we constantly need to revise and reinterpret throughout the new technology. The second experiment, maybe we could, and the last thing about Marker is that when he was questioned by journalists about new technology, whether he believed in new technology, he answered, "Oh, new technology, they don't go enough fast for me." And he thought that his work had to actually disappear with the technology that actually created it, so that it would be an ephemeral work. So this is where the vision of the artist and the vision of the institution might be different to some extent. Second project is something we did recently. In 2023, the Centre Pompidou acquired 18 works related to the blockchain, including 15 NFTs, properly speaking. So this endeavor was really to look at this phenomenon of the way artists embrace this technology of the blockchain in various ways that are very medium-specific, such as on-chain works, for instance, which raise new challenges. And those challenges regard the legal and technical aspects of how does an institution, which is a public institution, that is, of course, constrained with a unique, account system. How do we have a wallet? How do we have a crypto wallet, to allow for transactions and hosting NFTs? How do we preserve a work that is on chain and depends on the ecosystem of the blockchain? Our approach was not only to gather these three fields that are crypto artists, conceptual artists, coming from the visual art fields, as well as artists coming from the digital field, and see what they might, what the conversation might be between them, but also to relate them to early attempts in the history of conceptual art to think about immaterial artworks. So this question is not new, unlike what we read a lot in the press about NFTs, that it was the first time we thought about how to acquire an immaterial work. And we put in the vitrine in this room, notably the check by which Yves Klein in 1959 was selling actually what he called the zone of immaterial pictorial sensibility. That was in fact nothing that you could see or grasp. And the protocol, the ceremony for the transaction was that he would exchange this check against gold, pure gold, half of which was thrown into the river, half of which was kept by the artist, and then the collector would burn the check, so there would be nothing left from the transaction. So this is to say that our role as a museum is also to put into historical perspective the debates of contemporary art, and sometimes the tricky illusion that technology and the digital but bring like total novelty. It's not always fully the case. Another project I wanted to share with you concerns museography and how to maybe try to archive exhibitions in 3D. How do we think, and this was a challenge, some of you may be familiar with this milestone exhibition that was proposed by the Centre Pompidou in 1985 called Les Immatériaux, which is actually a neologism coined by philosopher of postmodernism Jean-François Lyotard to talk about how information society had deeply changed our relation to knowledge and experience through a form of abstraction process in relation to this field of knowledge. And so the challenging part for this was to use an archive that was incomplete. So to try to render through our virtual rendering of this, the knowns and the unknowns of the archive, also all the blind spots that we could not feel, and to show, and also a challenge because the exhibition itself was dealing with immateriality. So how do we give a sense of this immateriality within a device, a tool that is meant to simulate reality and to visualize in a convincing way something that would be graspable? So the beauty of the exhibition, it went really from, I will not tell you about this exhibition, it's huge, but it went from theater representation up to computer. So with what you're seeing here is the rendering of the last room. But the characteristic was this idea of the postmodern blur that Lyotard wanted to render through the system of walls that were not walls, but these mesh structures, what people could see through. For instance, here we are representing some artwork in the middle of the room because we didn't know. Here we have historical images that overlap the immaterial, virtual rendering, so as to show the various layers that you can, through time. And yeah, here you have another example. And of course, when you click on the image, you get the archive, displayed. So if you're interested, you can go through the, of course, this website, which is accessible. Last example, which I'm really just proud to show because it's a very last acquisition in terms of digital art. It's a major work by Melissa Dubin and Aaron Davidson, a couple of American artists who played with the idea of biofeedback. And I like this work because it really brings the technology back to the idea of a living organism, and it's really teaching us about the time delay. In fact, the title is Delay Lines that allow this machine to work. So maybe I will show you another example here. So it's an orphan of soft robotics that is used, the Ray Manta that you can see here, that is using the energy of water. The water is also cooling the system of the computer, and there is a video showing what the Manta sees. You know, an AI is actually capturing its movement to create this situation of producing a representation from this artificial life. I'm done.
Okay, we're all trying, we're racing against the clock. But I mean, it's already great. I'm glad you brought back something that isn't just purely digital and more metaphoric. But as an advocate for all these new forms of art in what is now a large historic institution, what is the biggest challenge you have? What are the constraints that you find yourself running up against? Where are the biggest obstacles in bringing this kind of work into a museum with all of its existing structures and processes?
Well, the constraints are multiple. You know, if you think of the time of the acquisition process in a public institution, it takes 6 months. With NFTs, we know that, you know, it's about doing this very quickly. So how do we manage to make it possible to acquire such works? How do we manage to use a smart contract, whereas our contracts are very long and include so many things that do not fit into a smart contract? The obsolescence, which is the rule for hardware-based works. So all these are challenges we need to play with. But I always go back to Nam June Paik's famous comment on the role of curators, which is that curators are like orchestra directors who are, you know, meant to regularly reinterpret a media work and make it happen, respecting the spirit, the artistic spirit of it, even though you have to go through new technologies or hybridation between old and new, which is also a very interesting perspective, in my opinion.
Well, I suggest we come back to this issue of criteria later on, because I think it's sort of hovering over this conversation a little bit. But I'm going to move on to Tom. You definitely come from the world of analog art. Your specialty relates to the most incredible analog artwork, some of the most incredible analog artworks created, which are these huge tapestries that took armies of craftsmen to make in their own day. Nonetheless, at the Met, when you were running the Met, you set up a very large digital media department, big push into digital there, and now at the Fine Arts Museum, pushing forward, obviously, right next to Silicon Valley. We worked together on something called the Museums of Tomorrow Roundtable, which Suhanya participated in, which is all about creating conversations between the worlds of technology and art. Quite an interesting experience. With all of those things in mind, tell us a little bit about what you're doing in your current museums and how that illustrates sort of the challenges and opportunities of adapting existing large museums to embrace this work.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'd also like to thank the West Kowloon authorities for inviting me, and especially Suhanya, Director of M+, for inviting me out here. Andres, you referenced the way that technology is changing audience behavior. And I think that is, you know, one of the key factors in museum leadership in the present day. Things are changing so fast. And I just want to look at 5 milestones that I think have really defined development in the museum world over the last 25 years. The first was, of course, the explosion of the internet in the early 1990s, when museums began to realize that something was going on. It was very often the marketing departments that first kind of said, oh, we have to have a website. This black and white image you're seeing here is the De Young Museum's first website. But I think from around 2000, we all, as curators, suddenly realized that there was this opportunity to publish and to engage audiences. And at the Met, as director from 2009, I really pushed the museum to get its collections online, to take the museum beyond the walls. And this is one feature, something called the Timeline of Art History, that has about 1,000 essays that kind of explain the history of art through the Met's collections. It really managed to kind of, I think, democratize access to information about museum collections in a very powerful way. The second milestone that I think really began to change our world very dramatically from about 2010 was the rapid development of portable devices. I remember having a conversation with Eric Schmidt, then the CEO of Google, and I said, what is the most important thing I should be investing in at the Met? And he reached in his pocket and he took out his BlackBerry and he said, this is the future. And of course, in fact, the iPhone had just been, the first iPhone had just been released by Apple. And I said, no, it's way too expensive, it's elitist. He said, Moore's law. These devices become twice as powerful, twice as cheap, twice as small every couple of years. And by the time I left the Met in 2017, he was dead right. Almost all of our visitors were carrying mobile devices. Here's an image of kids at the Reich Museum that went viral a few years ago, of heads down. One of our challenges is how do we get people to look up from their devices? But in a way, the answer to that came with social media. Instagram, Facebook, Snap, TikTok, where people began engaging with works of art, wanting to portray themselves, wanting to show themselves interacting. And of course, social media has become an amazing device that has actually, again, democratized access to museums, helped people feel much more comfortable coming into museums, not feeling they have to be part of an elite intellectual level. They can share images with their friends. I think a fourth milestone that is really kind of breaking over us at the moment is the whole movement of immersive experiences. Art has always been immersive, tapestries, Gothic cathedrals, but this new digital immersive experience that can turn an empty, blank warehouse into something like this TeamLab immersive experience is extraordinary. Now, this is the TeamLab experience with which the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco reopened 2 years ago. It costs more than $3.5 million. That's one of the problems. This is very expensive at this point. So by and large, this is happening in a realm of commercial entities. The Pace Superblue entity, for example, where you've got the kind of capacity to invest. It's very challenging for museums to match that. And then the fifth milestone, AI. This is a still from Alex Garland's 2014 movie, Ex Machina, in which Alicia Vikander plays a robot of superintelligence who basically realizes she's a robot, kills everyone around her to escape. And I think in a way that really characterizes our initial response to AI. It's a fearful one. At the Fine Art Museums, we organized an exhibition in 2020 called Uncanny Valley about AI in art and the way that algorithms are increasingly ruling our lives. This is a work by Stephanie Dinkins where she engages with a robot, asking it questions about race, about sex, about relationships. This is a work by Ian Cheng that's actually in the M+ collection, where this entity lives in the digital realm and grows and is fed by interactions with visitors. We're clearly in a period where we're going to see an explosive growth of art that is made in partnership with AI. We've just heard about Rafiq's amazing work. For me, as a museum director, where I'm really excited in this moment is where AI takes us into the next level of audience engagement. Museums around the world have now spent 30 years transferring analog data into digital data, but it's all so siloed. We all have our own databases. With AI, we have the capacity to unlock all of that information, to deliver it to our visitors at the sort of the level of knowledge they have about the world, about art, in their own language. Andres referenced this Museums of Tomorrow roundtable we had in San Francisco back in the spring. We went and visited the Google headquarters and met with their AI team. They told us that they had expected their AI model to take 5 years to learn Urdu, the language Urdu. It had taken 2. Within the next 12 months, I believe, we will have the next equivalent of, whatever it is, the mobile devices that will be able to give us information about art, drawing on decades of research in whatever language we choose, whatever voice we want it in. It's a frightening prospect, but it's also extraordinarily exciting as we think about how we make our collections, our knowledge, accessible to our visitors.
Well, thanks, Tom, and thanks for pointing out the fundamental issue, which is that museums, you're here to share all this with the public and make it intelligible to the public. But I just want to come back for 1 second to the point you made about TeamLab and how expensive it is and how much of this innovation currently exists in the commercial sphere. There are those who have long said, relative to museums, let the private sector sort out the bleeding edge innovation. Even as regards contemporary art, let the private collectors take the risks. Let the galleries and sort all that out. And when the dust has settled, then it's time for the museums. And as a practicing museum director, knowing how rapidly things are moving, how do you feel about that?
It's challenging because museums are increasingly, especially in America, where museums are largely self-funding. So we need to bring in an audience to sell memberships, to sell tickets, to fundraise. And we're increasingly in competition with all sorts of different media. And these immersive experiences are competition for us. So, it's tempting to bring the immersive experience inside our doors. But that's where the financial challenge becomes critical. I would love to say that in San Francisco, with all of those tech billionaires around, we have people queuing up to help fund projects like this. But in fact, the truth is that's not the case. Not yet.
But if anybody would like to step up and bring a check to the front.
I'll give you my
we'll
card.
Take it. Maholo, Chida, you are in a completely different and in some ways very enviable position of not having to retrofit an existing museum so that it can absorb digital art, because you are part of a team that is building a new institution, Gateway City, extraordinary project opening in Tokyo in 2026, spearheaded by none other than the Japanese rail system, which I wouldn't have thought as the most innovative organization, but you've told me just how innovative they are. You'll tell us a little bit about this. Your background is as a new media curator, so you're very much at home with digital art and gaming and immersive art and all of these things, which are, of course, very advanced in Japan. So at Gateway City, you'll be using some of these technologies to bring to life traditional culture. Tell us a little bit about this innovation process and how you're thinking about this Museum of Tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm very delighted to be here, and thank you for joining this conversation, and thank you for inviting me here. So let me introduce myself a little bit. I started my journey in the 90s as a media art curator, and later moved to the National Museum of Emerging Science and Innovation, known as Miraikan, which means Future Museum in Japanese. At Miraikan, I've been involved in many interdisciplinary projects spanning science, technology, art and design, and music. So let's say from TeamLab to humanoid robot, or from Bjork to the Earth. So I was lucky enough to witness the convergence of these different fields. This image is one of my proud project, American signature exhibit, a spherical display of the Earth. It is a beautiful and intelligent and communicative version of the specimen and models, the typical massive physical star exhibit of Science Museum, but it has also been used as a several art project. My latest endeavor, as Andreas explained, is to direct a new museum due to open in 2026 at Takanawa Gateway City, brand new area in the heart of Tokyo, developed by East Japan Railway Company with a new station, Takanawa Gateway, in the Tokyo's symbolic circle Green Line, Yamanote Line. Designed by Kengo Kuma, the building blends seamlessly with the surrounding Japanese native greenery. And we have a variety of venues, including an exhibition gallery, open studios, a live performance theater, and a gallery with a Japanese tatami mat floor. It is like a condensed version of West Kowloon district, I think. Additionally, there will be a rooftop garden with a shallow infinity pool, a footpath, and a charming little farm, seasonal plants, fruit trees, and flowers such as cherry blossoms. This garden will be also the venues for visitor program of Japanese rich seasonal art. Our mission is to connect culture for 100 years into the future by encouraging links between different disciplines. We aim to blur the boundaries between tradition and the future, nature and technology, art and science, West and East, exhibitions and live performance, and much more. As we do not have primary physical collection, which is lucky, maybe. So instead, we try to document our programs and visitors' experience as much as possible and make them available in digital format as a collection for future visitors to experience. We also aim to bridge the culture and age gap in communicating or understanding. We do this by linguistically and semantically translating various traditional art forms, local culture, and even pop culture, along with Japanese long history and unique context. By running with railway company, we plan to create a unique program connect to the railways. So this will bridge the gap between sectors and areas, urban and rural, and promote cultural exchange between the museum and the public space and stations, and also the wider local areas connected by the railway. All of our goals will be realized through digital technologies. Normally, I'd like to show you more and videos and photos, but I'm the only one who followed the limitation of 5 slides today. So I allocated 3 additional slides for today's the theme of this session, Promise of Digital. So what is the impact of digital technology on museums today? Let's take a closer look. And then also you have to excuse my kind of poor drawing. So, and traditionally, museums have been physically structured that house treasures and are visited by real people. There are 3 main elements: the building, and the physical treasures, and the human visitors. Do you agree? But with the advent of digital and internet technology, now we have 3 additional elements: online space and treasures in the several form of data and online users. Museums have extended their Museums have extended their reach through websites, digital archives, and online communities, visitors now expand into the city, other public spaces, and the home or even wild nature. And a second, as our lives become increasingly integrated with digital spaces, the museum will adopt a hybrid existence, blurring the boundaries between the physical and the digital, and the real and the virtual. Visitors will enjoy a multiverse of life, and so will the museum experience. What would the treasure be? So the idea of authorship will be extended to a wider public, including AI and robotics and other unknown human-like beings. The museum in the future will transcend traditional categories, redefining of beauty, originality, artifact, and public and private, and even time and space. I think in the future, the museum will function as a collection that captures the creative moment and processes of all human-like beings or the natural environment. We have captured a physical world so far, but in the future, the world itself will be digitized, informed, preserved, and museumized by digital technology. The promise of the digital has only just begun to free humans from the physical limitations that have been the greatest treasure of the museum.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes. So we have very little time for dialogue right now because we started late and I'm still being told we have to finish on time. But I mean, we've covered already a range of issues and we're leaving a lot to the next panel as well. We've talked a lot about all these different forms of new art. We've talked about some of the difficulties in bringing them into the museum. We've talked about unstable media. We talked about some legal and ethical issues that were mentioned around obsolescence of digital media. We talked about the changing audience and the way the audience relates to this. We've talked about how we will mobilize expertise in new ways in the age of AI, and indeed completely new institutional forms. One thing I'd like to quickly talk about is really what this whole conference is about, which is connections across the world and across institutions. I think it's fair to say that to unlock the promise of digital, we have to collaborate within our sector and outside of our sector. And I just want to ask anyone of the group of how you see that happening. How can we actually forge deep collaborations with the technology sector, with new donors, and indeed amongst ourselves to have the ability to deliver on all this promise? Whoever. Tom?
I think we're heading. I think we're heading in that direction. In museums, we're sort of in competition to try and get people through the door, and we've sort of held on to our collections and our exhibitions. But I think in recent years there's been a big movement because of digital towards a more sharing mentality. I mean, we got Wim, from former director of the Rijksmuseum, in the audience, which led the way by putting all of its collections out on an open commons license. And that was an example I followed at the Met back in 2017. Not all museums are there yet, but I think we are moving forward in that way. Yeah. And I think that with AI, there will then be this extraordinary capacity to kind of work across all these different platforms. So that's something I'm very excited about. Now, how we stop the AI hallucinating, how we have some kind of curatorial control is something we're still thinking about. So at the Fine Art Museums, we're kind of trying to figure out a way of having an interface that will be a kind of curatorial control to kind of have some sort of quality control of the information that will be disseminated.
You work with a lot of these guys.
Yes, I mean, 2012, when I moved to Los Angeles, I'm an independent artist. I don't have a gallery representation, so I'm not a part of the directly art ecosystem. And the ideas were kind of sometimes alone. And by the way, huge respect and love to Peter Weibel, who founded ZKM 2008, when he just told me that don't worry about the world, just believe the idea and push forward. And 2012, when I met with our friends at Google and NVIDIA engineers, and they were completely ready for innovation. And I found so much positive impact through collaborations. By the way, they are not like a ready buttons. They are not like a shortcuts. They are literally enhancing the possibilities by creating custom softwares, custom hardwares, like pushing that. I mean, like Namjoon Paik was also pushing in other like worlds and so forth. But I think there's an amazing possibilities once the technology leaders also becomes a part of the culture leaders. I think those worlds has to collide. And the other thing is, I think AI needs demystification. I believe museums and galleries and society is the place to demystify this. And I believe there's a massive possibilities for humanity to come to museums, to really understand what is next for humanity. So I'm very excited, and I'm pretty confident that tech giants are ready for, at least the people I am constantly in dialogue with, are very happy to contribute to the new era where we will question reality, we will question creativity, and I think we are entering into generative reality. So I think we will need a lot of dialogues and conversations with them.
Yeah, the other question we haven't answered, and I know we have to wrap up quite soon, is this whole question which you mentioned, Marcello, earlier, and I know you're working on it, which is, you know, we've had decades, centuries to think about criteria that we use to decide what to add into a museum collection. Here you have an art form or a set of art forms which is new. The discourses around them are new and not very well developed, if I might say. It's deeply interwoven with commercial interests. You know, look at the NFT market. I think a lot of museums felt a lot of pressure to jump in. Maybe they feel good that they didn't jump too hard. So how do you create these criteria around, how do you make these decisions? How should museums think about making these decisions with these very, very new products of innovation?
Thanks for the question, but it's a big question, actually. It's difficult to answer in one line. I'd say that, you know, for us, the criteria, for instance, for NFT was the question of criticality. I mean, to what extent the artists are also critical about the emerging technology and the financial speculation around it, and how, you know, NFTs was a product that was basically sold during COVID as this next generation of art, you know, technology. And how do we bring in all the question of the, you know, the way art has been addressing, you know, economy, copyright, appropriation. So for us, it's always to bring this new forms that appear in relation to what questions have been already addressed in art history, and what is it new, what is it simply reformulating or displacing some questions that have been already addressed. So I would say that's the main criteria. And also observing this shift, you know, in the beginning of video, you would have people coming not from the art field, but from music, from television, that would start using video. NFT is the same. Crypto artists, they are not trained as artists, and that's a very interesting phenomenon to renew forms of expression. So that's another criteria, just to name two criteria, but there's much more, of course.
Great. I'm going to ask my last question because we have only a few minutes to go, and it's a kind of a surprise question. I didn't tell the panelists about this question. So you already alluded to this. You know, I know you've had some great collaborations with these very large tech companies. When Tom and I went out to see Apple and Google and OpenAI, we felt that the doors were fairly closed, to be honest. I think there's a lot more we can do. But imagine that in the future this begins to be a possibility. And I'd like to have a little thought experiment here. Imagine that you were invited to a very special dinner by a group of tech luminaries. And, you know, Sundar Pichai is there from Google, and Jensen Huang is there from NVIDIA, and Sam Altman is there from OpenAI, and Tim Cook is there, and they've come together to meet with some art experts. And they would like to know, what could the tech industry do for artists and for museums so that they can truly make the most of this digital future and have an important voice in the digitally driven culture of the future. And they'd like you to answer this question. Now, what is it that they can do for our sector? And we're going to start with you.
Me.
And by the way, you can't say give us money because that's obvious. You can't just say give us lots of funding. You know, what would you like them to do for us?
Through my experience, I always organize kind of experimental research, using the museum. So, and the museum can be very wide test bed because we have a variety of visitors and, nationality and age and, So, and then like if we open the museum, so, and then the museum is really a nice place for like social research or, the digital experiment. So, and I would say to use our museum for what they want to, research or what they want to try, challenge.
As a great beta testing site.
Yeah. And then because artists can use, artists are really creative. So, and then they don't need, the tools that is given by somebody. They will find the new tools. So then I think, that the, tech company is just going forward, to do what they want to do. So, and then the museum can be open.
All right, so she would like to turn us into the collaborators on testing.
Yeah.
Tom, what would you like them to, what's your wish?
We have centuries of literature, history, research locked up in books that have all been scanned in the last 10 or 20 years by Google and other companies. The amount of information is staggering, and I would love them to work with us to think about how we can harness that for our own research and for our visitors as we think about our collections and as we think about art and culture and its role in the world.
Marcella.
Well, there are two very good answers already, so I won't say more about that. Simply maybe encouraging them to do also some digitalization work in regions of the world that may be less covered, in terms of how we digitize and archive knowledge, because what you're talking about is also maybe concerning a privileged part of the world. So in order to balance our relation and diversify our relation to knowledge, it's also about opening to wider regions.
Great, and Refik, I know for you, like hanging out with Sundar or Sam Altman just seems like a typical Tuesday. Nonetheless.
Truly, last week.
That and the Pope. Weren't you just in the Vatican? Okay, so just tell us, how can they make our dreams come true?
So I think it's the only way for artists to work with generative AI is to collect their own data, train their own AI models. The breakthroughs can only happen if the artists have a tool to make a breakthrough. Current tools are amazing, but they are the breakthroughs. They will not make a new artist breakthrough. So last 8 years, the reason I collect my own data, train my own model, is exactly for this purpose. But it's a luxury. It's a privileged situation. I think these giants has to give possibilities for artists to collect their own data, train their own models. And I'm happy to say that 4 of those giants are helping Dataland to really make it happen.
Well, it looks like there's a very positive future for our sector, but there's also a very positive future for all of you because a whole other panel is coming to explore this digital future for us. So thank you very much to our panelists, and thank you for the organizers. Thank you.
Thank you once again to our panel, and thank you, Dr. Santo, for moderating the session for us. Once again, a big round of applause to our panel, please. Thank you for sharing your insights. Thank you so much. With that, we'll conclude the first session here. The next panel discussion on decentering digital will start at 4:15 here at the M+ Grand Stair. So please enjoy the refreshments outside of the event venue. For guests who have interpretation headsets, please feel free to leave them on your seats. But you may want to return to the same seat when you come back for the next session. We'll see you again at 4:15. See you later.